now it's my honor, actually, to introduce a gentleman that has become a friend of mine, but more importantly, a great patriot, a great public servant. Ryan Zinke's career, I guess, started when he was a kid, going outside doing what we all love to do, which is hunting and fishing in the shadows of the Glacier National Park in Montana. From there he went to Oregon, University of Oregon, where he played on the football team for the Oregon Ducks, and after that decided that it was time to give something really back to America and joined the Navy SEALs. And he spent 23 years as a commander of the SEAL teams, including a commander twice of SEAL Team 6. When he retired as a commander out of the SEALs, he decided that he would go back to Montana, and from there he ran for state office inside the legislature and became a senator in the Montana state legislature. Not content that that was enough of a rise, he ran for the United States Congress, won that election, came to Washington, joined the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus as a sportsman and avid outdoorsman, served in the 114th Congress, and then won his re-election last fall to be a congressman again for this Congress in the 115th. But in the interim, the President of the United States called him and said, "We'd like to bring you in to talk to you about becoming the Secretary of the Interior," which I was delighted to hear that we were going to actually get a sportsman back in there. For those, yeah, absolutely right. And for those of you that, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but for those of you that don't know Ryan Zinke, he is a Theodore Roosevelt type of a person, and I'll let him fill you in. Please welcome the 52nd Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke.
Well, I'll share some remarks and I'll answer some questions, and we'll make it kind of a discussion among friends. First of all, I know it's a VIP because my wife's here. But Interior. When I walked in, the scale, one may forget, Interior is 12 time zones. We have the territories, and think about the Virgin Islands, how bad they got hit. But it's 12 time zones from the Virgin Islands all the way out to Palau. It's about a fifth of the territory of the United States. And no one loves public land more than I. You can love it as much, but you can't love it anymore. But our public land. Tomorrow, I'm going to sign another executive order, or another secretarial order, to restore and encourage hunting, fishing, traditional use. Yesterday, I signed one because as a kid who grew up in Montana, we cannot sustain year after year the burning of our woods. And this morning I was at the Teddy Roosevelt birthplace with a family, and I was reminded, those that look at history, Roosevelt is widely acclaimed as our greatest champion of the conservation ethic that we enjoy. And his experience, he went out west, he gained a love of the land, love of wildlife. He came back, and as president, he met Muir. And I have a great respect for John Muir and the Nationalists, but he met Muir. And he went on a ride in Yosemite with John Muir, and the ride was glorious. You can't repeat that ride today because there's too much dead and dying timber. He hired Pinchot, and there's a difference. Pinchot was multiple use, using best science in managing our forests. And we're going to do a pivot. We're going to go back and manage our forests by best science, best practices, remove the dead and dying timber, and restore the health of our forests. On our park system, I've probably been to 20 or 30 parks, and our parks are being loved to death. We're $11.5 billion behind in just our backlog of maintenance. $11.5 billion. And as the Secretary of Interior, I look at the books. If you go back to 2008, and I don't give judgment, because this group is bipartisan, and I can tell you there's two things our country needs to fund: the military and our parks. Now, the rest of it is a discussion. but the two imperatives, but I go back to 2008, look at the books. We made $18 billion a year in Interior just in offshore oil and gas, 18 billion. Last year we made 2.6. So we dropped $15 billion a year in revenue. And that's what happens if you put 94% of offshore holdings off limits. In the Strategic Oil Reserve, you make the most productive lands unavailable. And on scale, we would have made up our entire backlog, plus $3 billion of investment into our parks and into our wildlife refuges, which we desperately need in 1 year. So stand by. We're going to rebuild our parks. We're going to rebuild our refuges, and we're going to open up public land for us. It's ours. And when I did the monument review, what was most disturbing was monuments were used to prevent. Not always in a bad way. And there are some monuments out there that are absolutely deserving of protection. But when a monument is put in place and it limits public access, it eliminates hunting and fishing. It eliminates our ability to recreate on our land. There's concerns. So the president was absolutely correct in asking for a review. And I learned a lot. And I think as a Secretary of Interior to go out and look at it, and we have some magnificent monuments. I can tell you, Roosevelt was the first person to put a monument in place. In 1906, the first one was Devil's Tower. And it was controversial at the time. Some of it was Devil's Tower, 1906, it was very controversial. But also, it was also 1,200 acres. It's a lot of land. A little different than 1.7 million acres. But Roosevelt had a vision. I think all of us that love the outdoors and sporting and recreation and want to keep our kids active. Roosevelt's vision, I think, was phenomenal. And most of us that live in the West, we live in the shadow of what he created. And this morning, walking through with the family and looking at that, that's the type of courage I think we need to get. For the Interior to ask, what should we be the next 100 years? How do we best protect the land that has 330 million visitors through our park system, 500 million visitors through our public lands? How do we look at the next 100 years to make sure the wildlife corridors connect, the watersheds make sense, make sure that different branches and bureaus within the Department of Interior and our friends at the Forest Service actually do things more joint? And that's part of what we're about to begin on reorganization, is how to do things better, look at ecosystems, and how to organize ourselves in more of a joint fashion. And then how to catch up on our parks. So people ask me what are my priorities as a secretary. First and foremost is returning our public land to the public for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. Second is to repair and restore our park system and wildlife refuges to what they should be. An absolute experience that this great nation can be proud of. When you go in the parks, you're going to see that the people in the right uniform, the bathrooms are clean, and the trail system is not overloaded. And lastly, look at what Interior should be the next 100 years and have the same courage that Roosevelt did 100 years ago to make sure our nation's public lands are preserved, protected in perpetuity. So thank you for all you do. I can tell you our public-private partnerships are absolutely essential. I look out in the room and see a lot of friends. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to write a check. And I know that all the things that this room has done to preserve, protect our legacies of hunting and fishing and outdoor recreation, all those good things that America should be doing, I thank you, because without your help, it couldn't be possible. So with that, It's a wonderful time being the Secretary of Interior.